For decades, Dubai was not selling the world towers, yachts, or even zero income tax. It was selling a feeling rich people are ready to pay anything for. Absolute certainty that reality cannot touch you here. While wars burned across the Middle East, regimes cracked, and oil prices jumped, Dubai looked like it was living in a separate climate zone, a place where the sun always shines, the fountains keep dancing, new restaurants keep opening, and crises exist only in other people's headlines. That is why people did not come here as ordinary tourists. Billionaires, investors, fund owners, crypto millionaires, tax exiles, and people who wanted to buy not just a home, but a shelter all poured in. And the numbers seemed to prove the magic was real. The airport kept setting records. Real estate was rising like it was on steroids. Deals were being signed for tens of billions of dirhams, and the city itself looked like a victory over chaos. It was not just a hub. It was a promise. Here you could live as if the rest of the world existed somewhere far away behind glass. But that is the great lie behind every luxury showcase. While it shines, nobody wants to think that glass can shatter too. And that was exactly what Dubai stood on. The feeling that risk did not exist, that no matter what happened in the region, this city would still survive, bounce back, and come back richer. People got so used to that idea that they stopped keeping a plan B in their heads. Why keep a second passport close, map out an evacuation route, or even think about escape if you live in a place that spent decades marketing itself as the opposite of war? That is exactly why the blow felt so terrifying, not just physically but psychologically. When the first warning signs punched through that bubble, Dubai did not collapse like an ordinary city. It collapsed like a myth. Suddenly, the famous safety everyone bragged about looked less like a permanent wall and more like an expensive stage set. Everything that had looked like a symbol of power yesterday turned into vulnerability today. Glass facades, panoramic windows, luxury hotels, terminals, skyscrapers, rooftop pools, lounges overlooking the Gulf. All of it flipped in one instant from status symbols into danger signs. And this is where the worst thing happens. When it is not a building that collapses, but trust, the fall moves faster than any missile. The night that broke everything did not enter the story as one more incident. It entered as the moment Dubai stopped being an image and became a real place on the map of war. Just a few hours earlier, the restaurants on the Palm were full. Music was pounding through the clubs in Dubai Marina. Champagne worth thousands of dollars was being opened in luxury hotels. And then the sky split open. Air defense systems kicked in, missiles started moving one after another, strikes and debris rained over the country, and everything people had previously seen only in videos about other nations suddenly happened above their own windows. And it was not one flash, not one isolated strike built for a headline. Week after week, missiles, drones, and cruise attacks kept coming. But the larger catastrophe was happening inside people's heads. For the first time, they understood that Dubai was not an exception. It was not above war. It was inside the region, and that meant everything people had been running from for years could catch them here too. One strike on a consulate, one fire, one halted oil complex, one damaged facade, one airport terminal under attack, and the city that had sold luxury as a form of safety instantly began selling the opposite feeling: panic. The most frightening part was not even the physical damage. It was how fast everything flipped over. Yesterday, people were flying in. Today, they were trying to get out. Yesterday, VIP lounges were about comfort. Today, they turned into quiet auctions of fear. Seats on private jets were selling for insane money because everyone suddenly understood a brutal fact. When the air smells like war, time is worth more than status. Evacuation prices exploded. Flights to Istanbul, Geneva, Amman, anywhere, just farther away. Desert convoys, armored SUVs, private security. Dubai, which only yesterday was proud that protection was somehow already included in the price of life, suddenly became a city where protection had to be bought separately, and the more money you had, the wider your survival menu became. And that may be the strongest hook in the whole story. The real weakness of a city built on reputation is not that it can be physically damaged. The real weakness is that it can be turned overnight from a magnet into a place people flee. And when a city that spent decades selling certainty suddenly makes people desperate to leave, that is no longer just a crisis. That is a direct hit on the foundation of its entire model. Then the story turns even harsher, because the rich people who believed they had already bought themselves freedom suddenly slammed into a trap many had preferred not to think about. They were not living in Dubai only for the sun and the skyline. A huge number had gone there for tax exile. Britain, Europe, high rates, controls, complicated rules. All of that had been traded in for zero income tax, golden visas, and the feeling that at last their money belonged to them rather than their home states. But escaping from Dubai back home suddenly became not only a military risk, but a financial one. Those same countries they had once walked away from had not disappeared. Their tax offices had not forgotten anything. And when panic began, a great many ultra-rich people found themselves trapped between two fires. Missiles on one side, the tax systems of their home countries on the other, waiting for their return so they could switch all the old rules back on. The cruelest part of that trap is that almost nobody likes to discuss it openly, yet it may be the thing that pushed people closest to animal terror. You buy a rescue ticket for $350,000, step onto a private jet with gold bars in your hand luggage, and think you have won. Then you land and realize that another strike is waiting for you there. One without smoke or shrapnel, but with bills big enough to blow holes through fortunes. The whole glittering myth of complete freedom starts cracking. The irony is almost obscene. Money gave you the chance to leave, but money also locked you inside a system where one wrong move can cost a fortune. And this is where it becomes painfully clear how much Dubai was never really a home, but a carefully assembled set of conveniences. People lived there for years, opened accounts, rented luxurious apartments, sent their children to international schools, built paper trails for their new status, and then one crisis started smashing that architecture in a matter of days. It became obvious that many of them had not been living in a real refuge at all, but in a beautiful pause between one world and another, an expensive air-conditioned pause that worked only as long as the outside world stayed at a distance. The moment the outside world forced its way in, the whole structure exposed its core weakness. It had been paradise only until the first serious strike. And still, the darkest truth in this story is not that billionaires ran, losing money, cars, and illusions. The darkest truth belongs to the people who did not run because they could not. While some were storming private terminals, others kept living in dormitory blocks on the outskirts, 10 to a room, on wages that for Dubai's rich equal the price of a single dinner. While owners of Rolls-Royces and Ferraris abandoned their cars in airport parking lots with the key still in the ignition, labor migrants from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, and Indonesia stayed where they were. They built this city. They poured the concrete, laid the rails, cleaned the pools, and polished the marble in penthouses worth tens of millions. And they were the first to pay for what came into Dubai from outside. Not billionaires, not golden visa holders, but the people whose passports sit in a boss's desk drawer, who do not have the right to buy a ticket and walk away, who have no choice. This is where the shine of the Emirates stops looking like a triumph and starts looking like brutal moral accounting. It turned out that the city's luxury had stood for years on the backs of people who were often denied basic rights. And when fear arrived, the rich left with cash, gold, and lawyers, while the poor remained between closed borders, debt, sponsorship rules, and missiles overhead. That is the moment when the last display window shatters, because Dubai turns out to be not just a story about war and not just a story about real estate. It becomes a story about who really pays the price for someone else's safety. Dubai can be rebuilt physically, terminals can be repaired, runways cleared, construction sites restarted, billions poured in from sovereign funds, fountains switched back on, facades relit. But what is almost impossible to restore is the promise. And that promise was Dubai's main product. Not concrete, not glass, not apartments, not brands. The promise that here you are protected from the chaos of the world. Once that promise breaks, no sovereign wealth fund can buy it back quickly. That is why this story hits so hard. It does not hit only Dubai. It hits every place, every system, and every person who builds a life on the polished illusion that money can buy immunity from reality. It cannot. It can buy delay, comfort, a view out the window, and a plane seat out. But in the moment of truth, something else is revealed. The real value of any place is measured not by the height of its skyline or the tax rate in its brochure, but by whether it still has a soul when things become truly frightening. And that is the question now hanging over Dubai louder than any siren.